The Albany Hungarian Presbyterian Church today is an active small congregation which seeks to minister to a rapidly changing area. It is currently the only Presbyterian congregation in Livingston Parish. The old buildings may look the same, but the ministry and mission they serve has changed. The Albany Hungarian Presbyterian Church is actually the merger of two congregations which draw their roots from the Hungarian settlement. The Hungarian Presbyterian Church was founded in 1907 in the settlement. It was established to serve as the Protestant church for this settlement on a 20-acre tract of land donated by the Breckenridge Lumber Company. Throughout the first phase of its history, all services were held in Hungarian. The Reverend John Kovacs was the first pastor. It continued until the church was closed in the 1960s and it became a chapel mission. It reopened in 1974.
There had been Hungarian immigrants moving into the community to work at the Breckenridge sawmill, and as part of that, the Breckenridge family decided, as the settlement began to develop, that there was a need for a Catholic and a Protestant church, so they provided 20 acres to each congregation to establish those, and subsequently this church began to be formed in 1907. Shortly after they began to organize, they affiliated with the Presbyterian Church United States, the old Southern Presbyterian Church, and began to get themselves going and organized to become primarily a Protestant Christian presence in the community, and then also one who would help with the Hungarian heritage and to help people make the transition from Hungarian culture to American culture, issues like citizenship, speaking some English, just being able to function and get themselves settled in. In a new country, I think the first thing, since the original church here on the grounds did its services in Hungarian, is it gave them an automatic place where they could feel very much at home and could continue to worship God immediately without a huge amount of adjustment. But then along the way, the church also got involved, as I said before, in general education, helping people to get settled in, figure out how to vote, how to register, how to get land, get jobs. And then subsequently, the church was involved in assisting with certain local missionary needs, taking care of people, especially with the younger generation, helping them to adapt as they learned English, which you could say was part of the reason for the other church in town, that as those needs changed, then so did the mission of the church.
My family moved from Hungary to Ohio, and then they saw in the newspaper about the Breckenridge Lumber Company. And they migrated here and worked in the lumber. My grandfather worked in a lumber mill, and then they also started with the strawberry farm. So they've been here making their living through at farming mostly.
My grandfather, Joseph Bergi, came from Hungary, settled here in the Hungarian settlement in the early 1900s, and he ran a general store in Albany and became a member of this church and was very active in it. And the family all became members and have been members for quite a while.
We spoke Hungarian. My grandparents spoke Hungarian to me as a child. In fact, when I started first grade, I did not speak very little English. And I had difficulty really at school at first because I would leave my S's and break my words off. So it was a challenge for me for a while, but I still can understand the Hungarian language, and I can speak it a little.
The Albany Presbyterian Church was an attempt to reach out to Christians who were not of Hungarian heritage. With the younger generation of Hungarians being absorbed into the American melting pot, it made sense to start something new that reached out to a broader segment of society. Reverend Bartis was the first pastor. The church merged with the Hungarian Presbyterian Church in 2002. It became known as the Albany Hungarian Presbyterian Church.
In the long line of the pastors of this church, the Reverend Alexander Bartis certainly stands out the most. He was here approximately 46 years as evangelist, supply, and then pastor. Reverend Bartis was fluent both in Hungarian and English. In fact, he was sent away to school specifically to train for that purpose and then came back to the settlement. He was a native-born Hungarian who emigrated and then subsequently lived almost the rest of his life here, except for school. He was significant because not only was he a force within the congregation and in the presbytery, but he was actively involved in the needs of the community, banking, soil conservation. He was a strawberry farmer as well. He was also into a number of issues related to education, public policy, worked with the governor's office. So he had his hands in a number of things which had a significant impact on this area. This is the original structure. It has been built, I believe the date it was set up was about 1910. And the exterior and most of the main framing is all original. There has been some adjustment on the outside. The inside, the pews are original, the pulpit is original, most of the flooring is fairly original. It has been renovated since the 1970s, but what you have here is in many ways what they would have seen coming in the door, except it would have been what we called in the Presbyterian tradition very primitive, open windows, wood walls, a stove, a pulpit, and an organ and a piano, and that basically was it. It has withstood the test of time. It's been hit by several hurricanes. The most famous one was Betsy in 1965 when it took the bell tower off and they lovingly managed to get it back on top, so it's been there ever since. We joke we don't want to get up in the bell tower and rustle around too much. It might not hold up as much as we'd like, but it's been a solid building. This church was founded in 1907 and was a fairly regular presence of a Hungarian speaking until approximately the 1960s when it became more of a mission. It was reconstituted in 1974 when it reopened as a viable congregation. The Albany Presbyterian Church was established in 1946 as an English-speaking sister church, and it existed until 2002, which was the year that the two churches, after many years of sharing ministers and trying to work together, decided it was time to merge back together. And at that point, they closed the building, sold it in Albany, and the entire group moved back to the settlement.
Cemetery, one of a rare few that are set up with graves facing north to south. The earliest headstones are in Hungarian. The row markets list church family names, the first 13, the founding families of the Hungarian Church, and 8 more of families active in the history of the congregations. The story that was told as to why the graves face south is that Hungarians are curious by nature. This way, the deceased can see who's going by. The church building. This is the original structure. It has been renovated over the years, especially since reopening in 1974. The basic structure is unchanged. The building leans on the east side and the tower was blown off by Hurricane Betsy and replaced. Originally, the inside was a plain wood structure with exposed wood and walls. It had a central pulpit, small organ and choir loft, a furnace, and the existing pews with no paint or cushions. Since reopening, the sanctuary has received a facelift on the inside. There is not a sound system. The choir loft is bigger. Recently, the building was rewired and visual screens were added for use in worship. Plans are underway to stabilize the building, refurnish the exterior, and possibly include better handicap access. The building is no longer a historical landmark. Improvements and the desire to keep the structure in active use made it necessary to let go of this distinction.
The church is important to my grandfather and our family because it helped to bring the community together. They provided a lot of information and education and a lot of, social activities that they enjoyed, dancing and getting together, and were involved in a lot of things like that, as well as the church business.
My family was involved with the church. Reverend Bartis was my grandmother's brother, and of course all the family came here as members, and I was raised in this church and married, and my children were married in this church, and our life just revolves around this community, our church here.
My father came from Hungary, my mother also. They settled in West Virginia, and Daddy worked in the coal mines for 22 years. And they wanted to get away because there was 10 children in the family. So he read about the Hungarian settlement in the Szabadság, which is a Hungarian paper. And through that paper, we purchased a piece of land, 30 acres, and we started raising the crops that they raised down here. We didn't know much about farming, that large amount, but it's strawberries, cucumbers, peppers, and what have you. So we raised that as long as Daddy and Mom lived, and then, well, I married a Hungarian, and we continued to raise strawberries up until 1975. And my daddy was a very active member of this church when we came here in '41. And matter of fact, I sang in the choir here when I was 15 years old, and I'm still singing in that choir. And this church means the world to me. I got married in this church. I christened all 5 of my children in this church. My second daughter married in my wedding gown in this church. And I just couldn't live without this church being here. It has been my life, and I love this church, and it's done a lot for me, and I just can't say enough about it.
In conclusion, I believe it's important to maintain it because, one, there's still the desire to remember the Hungarian heritage, and the church is very much a part of that. But at the same time, it also shows how the Hungarian influence continues to have an impact as it adapts to a changing community and a changing society, which very much is going on here.